Well, hello, church. My name is Melissa Urek, and I'm on the staff team here at The Well, and I love being able to welcome you to our online worship services. Now, if you're watching this on the day that we air it, then it's Sunday, August the 1st, and there are two very important things that are happening here in Ontario today. The first is, it's a long weekend, so happy long weekend to you. And the second is, August always means All Together Now services here at The Well. Did you hear me right? It's a really catchy name. I wouldn't want you to miss it. Here we go. They're called All Together Now services. And what that means is every August here at The Well, we shut down our kids' classes, gather the entire church together in services that are designed with the family in mind. It means these services are more interactive. There are games that we play and discussion questions that are introduced and lots of different ways for the congregation to be able to engage with the teaching that is happening. And you'll notice even a little bit of a difference here today as you watch it online. The second thing about All Together Now services is when we gather in person, they're usually louder. That's because all ages are together. And we love that. One of our core values here at The Well is that we are better together. And never is that more apparent than in the month of August when we sing together songs that even the kids sing in their classrooms. And so there might be actions and different things for you to engage in as well. As we discuss and wrestle with different truths that we're learning together. And really just being in God's presence, all ages, is such a beautiful picture of what heaven will be like. We just love it. And so if you are someone who's been a little bit nervous about coming to any of our online our in-person gatherings because we haven't had kids programming available, this would be a great time for you to check out our in-person services. We're gathering in all 3 of our sites for the month of August. And so you can bring your kids along and you can just relax. That you don't need to worry about them being loud or getting up and walking around. That's actually the whole point of All Together Now services. So you should totally come. Okay, so these services are more interactive. They're usually a lot more loud, and they're always a lot more fun. We're so glad that you have chosen to join us today. Over the course of this month, we're doing a teaching series called Women of Faith Who Have Changed the World. There's a few different reasons why we're doing that. The first is all ages love a good story. It's true, right? It's why we watch movies and binge Netflix and devour books. We all love to hear stories. We also love to hear these stories because they're inspiring. They remind us of how ordinary people can do extraordinary things. But ultimately, the reason that we do a teaching series such as this is to remind you that actually the Holy Spirit, that God is writing a story in your life as well. That there's nothing magical or extraordinary about any of these people other than the fact that they submitted their life to Jesus. And so, over the course of this next hour, as we sing together and pray together and answer questions and play games, our hope and our prayer for you is that you will have a keen sense of God's calling on your life as you listen to the stories of these women of faith who have changed the world. Welcome to the Well.
Sing this together, friends. And I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. Man's empty praise, the treasures of faith are never enough. Then you came along, and you put me back together. Satisfied here in your love. There's nothing, oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. Show you my weakness, my failures and flaws. You've seen them all, and you still call me friend. Amen. 'Cause the God of the mountains is the God of the valley, and there's not a place of mercy and grace find me again. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing, nothing is better than you. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn graves, sing it out. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. Yeah, you turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You're the only better than you. There's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing. Nothing is better than you.
No other love can lift me up, lift me up. No other love will do. No other arms are strong enough, strong enough. No other love like you. Yeah, your love is deeper than the ocean, and it's higher than the mountain peaks. Every day that I live and every breath I breathe, your love is reaching out to me. No other love can lift me up, lift me up. No other love will do. No other arms are strong enough, strong enough. No other love like you. Yeah, it comforts me when I am hurting. Yeah, it gives me joy, it gives me peace. It's everything I need, yeah, it's the song I sing. Your love is reaching out to me. No other love can lift me up, lift me up. No other love will do. No other arms are strong enough, strong enough. No other love like you. No other love can lift me up, lift me up. No other love will do. No other arms are strong enough, strong enough. No other love like you. Your love is alive in me. Your love, it sets me free. No other love than the love you give. Your love is raining down. It's got me singing loud. No other love than the love you give. Your love is alive in me. Your love, it sets me free. No other love than the love you give. Your love is raining down. It's got me singing loud. No other love than the love you give. No other love can lift me up, lift me up. No other love will do. No other arms are strong enough, strong enough. No other love like you. No other love can lift me up, lift me up. No other love will do. No other arms are strong enough, strong enough. No other love like you.
Hey, welcome to Church at the Well, and welcome to what we call every August, All Together Now. That is just celebrating the fact that we are a multi-generational church, that we have people in pretty much every age bracket, and at different times we have different classes and different things for different ages, but every August we are all together now. So there's actually a bunch of us gathering all together now for our in-person service in Bolton, but many of you are gathering online. And even though you may be in separate places in your cottage or at home or wherever, we are all together as a family. This summer, we are talking about women of faith who changed the world. And just to get you warmed up on that, we got a game called Who Said It, Who Did It, about famous women or some famous things that they did. So you can play along. I'm going to give you the question. You guess the answer at home. See if you can win. Although, come on, it's not a competition. It's 2021. Everybody gets a participant trophy. Okay, here we go. Ready? Who said it? Who did it? Who said it? Let them eat cake. Who said let them eat cake? Was it Marie Antoinette, the Queen of France? Was it Mary Queen of Scots? Or was it Nicole from Nailed It? Okay, you make your guesses, A, B, or C. Drum roll, please. It is Marie Antoinette. Now, they don't really know whether she actually said it, but it's attributed to her, so there you go. So, see how you're doing after one question. Second, here we go. Who did it? Okay, this woman in 2019 defeated a 23-time major champion to become the first Canadian to win a major tournament in her sport. Was it golfer Brooke Henderson? Was it tennis player Bianca Andreescu? Or was it Black Widow of the MCU? You're like, I didn't know she was Canadian. Well, make your guess now, okay? Here we go. Drum roll, please. It is, of course, Bianca Andreescu. Yes. All right. Who said it? The only tired I was tired of giving in. Was it Cruella de Vil from 101 Dalmatians? Was it Taylor Swift? Sounds like a Taylor Swift lyric, I think. Or was it Rosa Parks? Put your guesses in. Drum roll, please. It was the amazing Rosa Parks. Yes. All right. Who did it? This woman has won the most Olympic gold medals in Olympic history. Is it Dara Torres, swimmer from the United States? Is it Birgit Fischer, the canoeist from Germany? Or is it Larissa Latynina, the gymnast from Russia? Make your guesses. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. It is Larissa from Russia. She holds the record for most gold medals won by a female in Olympic history. It is Olympic season, so we're celebrating. Okay, last one. Who sang it? Who sang Let It Go? Was it Idina Menzel? Was it Elsa? Or was it Celine Dion? Okay, this is low-hanging fruit, okay? It was, of course, A and B. It was Elsa, sang by Idina Menzel. All right, that is just to get your brain going on this series where we are at this next month called Women of Faith Who Changed the World. Now, there are a lot of amazing women throughout history and even living now, and maybe some of you know some of them in your own family, who have changed the world. But this series, we're talking about women of faith, in particular, their faith in Jesus. It was their faith in Jesus that was the motivation, or the faith itself, that actually put their print on the world and changed the world and has changed the world for all of us. And so we're hoping over these next few weeks that you will be inspired and challenged and encouraged, whether you are a woman or a man. Here's the interesting thing. We don't talk a lot about women of faith who changed the world. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. Sadly, for many years and many centuries and many places around the world, many countries, probably every corner of the world, women have not been valued as equal, as worthy as men or others. And so there's been a lack of focus on women in general, but also in the church as well. And even if you think about it, if you read the Bible, written over the space of 6,000 years, covering multiple cultures and multiple places, in fact, we don't know every author of every biblical book, but they're pretty much all men. And in fact, they cover cultures and times where women weren't valued. In fact, in ancient times and ancient cultures, women were considered more like property than people, which was why it was okay then. And actually in some cultures now, people say, oh, it's okay for a man to have multiple wives. He can marry as many women as he wants. Just like if you were rich, you could buy as many cars as you want. I know we think, oh, that sounds so terrible. And it is. But in ancient cultures, women were viewed as property. And so it's easy, and it could be easy actually to think, oh, does God think that way? Since there are stories in the Bible of people marrying multiple women or covering cultures and times where women weren't valued, where those were cultures and times where women were treated as property. It would be easy to think, or wonder, does God think like that? And yet, if you find from the beginning of Scripture, the earliest pages, we see God subtly and not so subtly working against the cultural norms and values and beliefs and even sin that would seek to oppress or devalue or push down women as not worthy or not equal to men. We see God actually working against those things to destroy oppression, to work against inequality. And this is actually something so profound that people of God are meant to realize. The women's movement or the equality of women is not some new idea that a few people recently have come up with. Of course, it's getting more prominence now with social media and the things that we are regularly and for good reasons talking about. But it's not a new thing. God has been at this for centuries, trying to break the power of and the systems and the beliefs and the sin that have kept women oppressed, that have devalued them, that have made women think about themselves, or girls, that they are not valuable or equal, or men or boys think that way about women, and that God is actually on this mission to restore equality and health and wholeness to relationships between men and women, to the way women and girls see themselves, to the way men and boys see women, and God is a part of this. And certainly when it comes to Jesus, there's nothing subtle about it. I want you to listen to what one author, Bruxy Cavey, describes as the way Jesus was working to restore and redeem women. He says, when I was young, I wondered why Jesus didn't come to earth as a woman. They seemed smarter to me. I also wondered why Jesus hadn't come as an Irishman, our family's part Irish, or even as a three-toed sloth, my favorite animal. And why he had come only once so long ago instead of coming today and every day for a visit. My dad was a gentle, gracious, and wise man. I often peppered him with my weird and wonderful questions, and he would patiently help me think through possible answers. Why did Jesus not come as a woman? I'd ask him. He could have, my dad would say. God can do anything. But men were powerful people in that culture, as in most. And maybe Jesus came in that form in order to teach the people with power how to lay it down. Remember him teaching his disciples to wash feet? In that culture, a job like that was reserved for servants or women who had no power. But Jesus washed his all-male disciples' feet. He told them they needed to learn how to wash feet too. This is the incredible thing about Jesus and the work that he came to do in the world that completely changed the fortunes and the future of all women and changed the way that men and women, boys and girls, see women. And so that's what we're doing over these next few weeks in this series. And today, there's no better person to kind of kick off this series. Actually, all the rest of the people we're profiling are people who lived after the time the Bible are written. But I'm beginning today with one woman in the Bible who was alive at the time of Jesus, who played a key role in what Jesus was doing in his work of healing, redemption, and restoration on the earth. She's someone that maybe you would not have noticed before. Maybe you never even heard about her growing up, or you did, it was just a little bit, and she's here and there, but not much. And so I want to introduce or reintroduce her today. Her name is Mary Magdalene. Her name, Mary Magdalene, is based on the fact that she was from a town called Magdala, so Mary of Magdala. And here's the fascinating thing about Mary. She's mentioned in all four Gospels, but only 3 times. So in Matthew's biography of Jesus, for example, the Gospel of Matthew, she's mentioned 3 times. The Apostle Peter, he's mentioned over 25 times. John, also over 25 times. Mary, only 3. And yet, those 3 verses and her life is incredibly significant and meaningful, not just for her in that time, not just for women and girls, but also for men and boys. For all of us, she provides an inspiration and a challenge in the way she lived her life. The first mention actually is in the Gospel of Luke. She appears just early on in the ministry of Jesus when Jesus is starting to, his ministry is starting to become public. Up to that point, he had been a carpenter's son. Nobody really knew much about him. He wasn't anybody different than anyone else living in his hometown. But as he started to teach and preach, and his ministry started to have more prominence and focus, we read this in Luke's Gospel, Luke chapter 8. I want you to listen as it's read for you.
After this, Jesus traveled about from one town and village to another, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom of God. The 12 were with him, and also some women who had been cured of evil spirits and diseases. Mary, called Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had come out, Joanna, the wife of Chuza, the manager of Herod's household, Susanna, and many others. These women were helping to support them out of their own means.
This is one of the 3 times, the only 3 times that Mary is mentioned. And yet, as I said to you, every time she is mentioned, it is incredibly significant. This is at the beginning of Jesus' ministry as he is starting to call what we know is as his disciples. And he has 12 disciples in particular, all men that he picks. And when we say the word disciples, if you've grown up in the church perhaps, or you heard that before, you think, oh yeah, the 12. But Jesus actually had a broader community of disciples that included women. And here's the first thing we find out about Mary Magdalene and her faith. Mary was a woman disciple. Mary was a woman disciple. And you might think, okay, so big deal. She was a woman disciple. Here's the thing. No women were disciples in those days. The idea of disciple, or the term, the word comes from the word talmudim. And just let me give you a little kind of nerdy out history on that. It's actually really important to know and understand. Because the disciples in general existed long before Jesus came along. And they were never women. Here's how it worked. If you were a 4 or 5-year-old boy or girl, so maybe if you're listening, you're 4 or 5, this would have happened to you. You'd go to school, kind of like you do when you're now, when you're 4 or 5, and you would all go to school together, and in school, the local rabbi in the town, the local teacher, would be a part of your education process, and he would teach you from the Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Old Testament: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. He would teach you the history of the world and the history of your people, the Jewish people, and you would learn that together as boys and girls at age 4 or 5. But after that, the girls would leave school and start to learn from their mothers in their home how to run a household, how to cook, how to clean, because that was going to be their job. They were going to eventually become, hopefully, wives of someone who had a home, and they would be a home keeper, a homemaker, and eventually, hopefully, a mother as well. So they had to learn how to raise children. They had to learn how to cook and clean. And so girls did not continue on in school. Now, the rest of the boys, some of whom showed aptitude, would continue on to what was called the house of the book. And so now they would actually start to memorize the first 5 books of the Bible. I don't know how many books, any books you've memorized. I mean, maybe, green eggs and ham. Maybe you memorized that growing up. But they memorized the first 5 books of the Bible, okay, in the house of the book. Now, not all of them did it well, okay? Some of them did not do well in school. Some of us are like, hey, I don't have a good memory. I would have been out. Well, only the ones who could do it well moved on to what was called the house of the synagogue. And that was where they actually learned to memorize the whole Old Testament, all 39 books, more than half of your Bible. This was what, really, again, only the good students. The rest of them would go back to their families and learn a trade. So they would, if their father was a carpenter, they would go back to their home and become carpenters. If their father was a blacksmith, they would go to their home and learn to become a blacksmith. If their father was a fisherman, they would go out in the boats and learn to fish. They were done with school. Only the best of the best could move on to the house of the synagogue. And then, from there, the cream of the crop would be chosen probably by a local prominent, like a very well-respected, probably the best rabbi in the town, to become disciples, talmudim. And these were the ones that now would devote every part of their life to following around this rabbi and becoming like him, learning the ways he lived and taught and understood, and hopefully become a respected rabbi themselves. But it was the best of the best. Only that you had to be smart, you had to come from a good family, you had to present yourself well, and you had to be a man. That was what a disciple was. And yet, in the biographies of Jesus, we start to read about this other rabbi, Jesus, who comes along, who was not a talmudim of anybody else. He wasn't anybody else's disciple. They said, where did this guy come from? He was a carpenter's son. He went up to that school for a little while and then went and became a carpenter's son. He was not the best of the best. He was not chosen by a well-respected rabbi in that town to become a disciple so that he could eventually be a rabbi too. None of that happened to him. And yet, everyone was starting to call him rabbi. Why? Because he was teaching with a kind of authority and wisdom that none of the rabbis had. The people were noticing, who is this man? He was not only teaching, he was healing with a kind of power that they had never seen. They'd only heard about some of their famous prophets, Elijah back in the day doing miracles. And now they're seeing this rabbi who's actually not just teaching with power, he's healing with power. He was casting out demons, doing something incredible. And he was starting to actually call disciples. But he chose people who had flunked out of the discipleship school. He chose people who were tradespeople, who were fishermen, who were doing other things. They hadn't made it. They weren't the best of the best. And so he begins to call the 12, who nobody else would have called and invited to be Talmudim, but he also invites women to join him. And Mary was a woman disciple. And here's what's remarkable about Mary coming along as a disciple. And some people would say, oh, no, she wasn't a disciple. There was just the 12, and they were along for the ride. But the words that it says some women also followed him. And the word there doesn't mean, oh, they literally kind of walked in his steps. Of course, they went with him. It's the same word that was used when it says Jesus called the 12, and they left their nets or they left their jobs, and they followed him. It was a discipleship word. It meant you were part of the Talmudim. And so Jesus was not only calling men who had no business being disciples, he was including for the first time ever women as well. And Mary Magdalene is mentioned as one of those disciples. It actually says that she was someone who had been freed from demons. And we're not going to get into all of what that means. But basically, Jesus had done a miraculous healing in her life that affected her body, her mind, and her spirit. Now, here's the remarkable thing about Mary. Many other people had been healed by Jesus. Jesus had cast out many demons from people. He healed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, probably thousands by the time his life was done. But very few of them became disciples. Very few of them stayed to follow him. She obviously realized, hey, if someone has the power to do that in my life, I am not going to leave his side. And so Mary becomes a woman disciple. But not only that, not only did she probably, decide, hey, I want to do this, she probably had to overcome some fears to do that. Fears of what other people would have said about her. It was not normal ever for a woman to be a disciple. And so people probably started rumors, right? And in fact, we know some of those rumors still persist to this day. People think, oh, Mary was married to Jesus, or she was in love with Jesus, and all this romantic idea as if somehow nobody could follow Jesus as a woman and not fall in love with him. She was following because she loved him just like the other disciples loved him. But she probably had to put up with rumors and people looking at her sideways, maybe even her family or relatives thinking, what are you doing? Nobody does this. No woman does this. How could you do this? She probably had to push past the fears of what other people thought of her, or maybe what she thought about herself, thinking, am I good enough? I'm not the best of the best. I shouldn't even be here. Women aren't even allowed to be disciples. And there she was, and she would not, no matter how much fear she had, and she probably did about it, the fear was not strong enough to keep her from following Jesus. It's the first beautiful thing we find out in this very small verse about Mary Magdalene, that she was a woman disciple. But the second remarkable thing, there's actually three of them that we find out in these three verses. The second remarkable thing we find out about Mary Magdalene was not only she was a woman disciple, she was also a woman at the cross. You see, when Jesus eventually got too powerful and too prominent and too popular for the religious leaders and the Roman establishment, they killed him. They arrested him, they imprisoned him, tried him, and killed him. And all four biographers of Jesus note these two things, that all of the male disciples left him. When he got arrested, literally the words say, they all fled. All of the male disciples fled. Why? Because they were afraid. If he got arrested, we could get arrested. If he's getting thrown in prison, we could get imprisoned. If he's getting killed, we will likely get killed too. That's how you stamp out these messianic movements that you did not want to have happening in your town, in the Roman Empire. And so the male disciples fled, but you know what all four biographers also say? That many women stayed at the cross, in particular, Mary of Magdala. Mary Magdalene's faith was not just one that says, I am going to be a disciple. I'm going to overcome and push past fears of what other people think of me, or maybe even what I think about myself, to stay with Jesus. She was also willing to push past fears of being arrested, imprisoned, and killed, all of which were real possibilities for followers of Jesus. And instead, even though all of the men left, she stayed at the cross. It actually says one male disciple was there, John, but all the rest were women. And Mary Magdalene was at the front. She was not only a woman disciple, she was a woman at the cross. And thirdly, what we find out in the third verse about Mary is that not only was she at the cross, but she was a woman at the tomb when Jesus was buried. By this time, none of the male disciples were around. Only one stayed at the cross, but none of them followed to the tomb. It says Mary and a few others walked and followed where Jesus was being buried. They wanted to see that he was being buried, given a proper burial. They wanted to know where he was being buried so they could anoint his body and prepare it, usually with spices and things like that, because they knew nobody else thought anything of him. They weren't going to do it. The disciples, you know where they were? The male disciples? They were hiding in a room. We know actually the biographies of Jesus include this, that the disciples, after Jesus was killed, the male disciples went into hiding in a locked room. They were still worried for their lives. But Mary and a few other women continued to follow Jesus, listen, even after he was dead. This is not just pushing past fears of what other people would think about her or say about her. This was not just pushing past fears, still real and present, of being arrested or imprisoned or killed. This was even pushing past fears of what happens when I don't have any more hope in my life. At this point, there was no more rabbi to follow. There was no more Messiah to put her hope in. There was no more Son of God to be worshiped. He was dead, and yet she was still following him. She refused to leave his side, not only as a disciple, not only at the cross, but also at the tomb. Isn't this remarkable? It's remarkable faith. Only 3 verses mentioned about this woman in the whole Bible. Peter and James, so much more. And yet this woman did something remarkable, pushing through all the fears to stay following Jesus no matter what. And she's mentioned again and again and again. And because of this, she received a reward like nobody else had ever received. And I'm going to tell you what that is in a moment. But first, while we're on the subject of fears, I want to pause for a second and let's just talk about the fears that you and I have in our lives. Now, we're going to play a little game. It's what are you afraid of? Okay, and this is actually, I'm going to list these kind of big words you'll see, and they all end in the word phobia, which means fear, and certain kind of fears. And maybe some of them you know, maybe some of you don't. So I'm going to give you a little bit of time again, play a little quiz at home if you're listening or whatever in your car. You can say it out loud. The universe can hear you. All right? I'm going to give you the name of phobia, and then you have to decide what is it, okay? First one, we're starting with easy, low-hanging fruit. If you watch this movie in the 80s or 90s, I don't know, with John Goodman, arachnophobia. What are people who have arachnophobia afraid of? Oh, you know this. You're going to get creeped out even to see the picture. They're afraid of spiders. Gross. Arachnophobia, right? That is a fear of spiders. Okay, how about this? Astrophobia. Astrophobia. This is not you being afraid of yogurt, astro yogurt, okay? Astrophobia. This is about fear of thunder and lightning. Did you know that was a fear? Okay, some of you are afraid of it, and you're legit. Hey, there's lots of people like you, okay, who hide under your bed when it's thundering and lightning. That's normal, okay? Astrophobia. Here's the third one, cynophobia. Oh, a lot of people have this one. You know what that is? Cynophobia? It is fear of dogs. You're like, how could you be afraid? You can't be afraid of that. Look at that cute dog. You can't be afraid of him. Okay, but some people are. Maybe not that dog. Okay, what about this one? Ophidophobia. Okay, I have this one. Full confession, I have ophidophobia. Even putting this picture on freaked me out. You know what it is? It is a fear of snakes. Yuck. Woo. Okay, ophidophobia. Last one. This one's very scary, apparently, for some people. Trypophobia. Trypophobia. Some of you are shaking already. You know what that is? A fear of holes. I don't know. I don't know what the fear of holes thing is about. Okay, I don't know how you did on the game, but hopefully you conquered some fears even as you're listening. But let's be honest. The same fears that Mary faced, you and I face. And we are afraid of the same things. I don't know about you, but I'm afraid of what other people will say about me because of my faith in Jesus. I'm afraid of the opinions of other people. People talking negative about me or not being happy with what I'm doing. I'm afraid sometimes that I don't measure up. I'm afraid of my own opinion of myself. That I'm not good enough, that I can't, my faith's not strong enough, that I fail too often. We have those fears. I have fears, and maybe you have fears about physically what would happen to me. Mary had to push past fears of being arrested or imprisoned or death. When I hear about other people who are my age, maybe who are in trouble, or pastors in other parts of the world who are getting arrested because they are pastors, because they are leaders of churches, and their churches are getting burned down. Those are things that I think I would be afraid of that. I don't know if I could stay following Jesus if I was threatened to lose my life. I want to think I could, but I'm afraid of that if that actually happened. That would cause me to have fear. It may make me doubt or saying, God, can I really keep following you? You're really asking me to do this? And then there's the fear of saying, how do you have faith when all hope is lost? When it seems like what you're hoping for is impossible or past the point of no return, right? Mary's Messiah, the one she thought was the one, was dead. And she refused to stop following him. She stayed with him. But we have fears about, well, what if I'm wrong in my faith? What if this doesn't work out? What if what I'm hoping for can't come true? What if Jesus can't come through for me? Well, the beautiful thing is the Bible, and certainly in Mary's life, it doesn't present to us something easy. Mary had faith and courage and tenacity, and that isn't the absence of fear. It's just the willingness to keep following even in the midst of fear. And so the band's going to lead us in a song. It's a song we sing often, and it's just a prayer that says, Jesus, give me faith. I feel weak, but you are strong, so give me faith. And so maybe even as you're singing it, you just want to listen, and maybe you're dealing with some fears and things that you have in life that you're afraid of, whether it's the opinions of other people or feeling like you don't measure up or feeling like you're afraid even in this season of getting sick or what might happen to your body or feeling like you're afraid to hope when it seems like hope is lost. Just use this song as a prayer to say, Jesus, give me faith.
I need you to soften my heart and break me apart. I need you to open my eyes to see that you're shaping my life. All I am, I surrender. Give me faith to trust what you say, that you're good, your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life. Amen. Let's sing this as a prayer. I need you. I need you to soften my heart and break me apart. I need you to pierce through the dark and cleanse every part of me. Yes, Lord. All I am, I surrender. Give me faith to trust what you say, that you're good, your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life. Oh, 'cause I may be weak, 'cause I may be weak, your spirit's strong in me. My flesh may fail, my God, you never will. I may be weak, your spirit's strong in me. My flesh may fail, my God, you, 'cause I may be weak, your spirit's strong in me. My flesh may fail, my God, you never will. 'Cause I may be weak, your spirit's strong in me. My flesh may fail, my God, you never will. So give me faith to to trust what you say. Sing this out. That you're good, your love is great. I'm broken inside, and I give you my life.
Mary Magdalene shows us such an incredible picture of a faith that is tenacious and courageous, that pushes past fears. And even though she's only mentioned 3 times in each of the gospel biographies of Jesus, her willingness to stay following Jesus no matter what got her a reward that even though many people may have forgotten or not known about or excluded Mary Magdalene, she never forgot. And when I say that, I mean people actually forgot or left her out of the story years later. In about 40 AD, about 10 years after, around 10 years, after Jesus had died and was raised to life. He came back to life 3 days later after he was crucified. The Apostle Paul is writing a letter. He's someone who became actually a Jesus follower. He thought Jesus was totally a liar and a fake, and then he was convinced because of the resurrection that he was real. And so he becomes this follower of Jesus, and he's writing a letter to a church to try to explain to them the truth of what he heard about the life and death and resurrection of Jesus. Now listen what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15. He says, "For what I received, I passed on to you as of first importance." And now he's reciting something that he was told and that he's learning. That was the news that was being passed around about Jesus. That Christ died for our sins, according to the scriptures. In other words, he fulfilled prophecy. That he was buried and he was raised on the 3rd day, according to the scriptures. And that he appeared to Peter and then to the 12 disciples, the men. Peter was one of the 12. He said, when Jesus Christ came back to life, he appeared to Peter and then to the 12. The problem is, St. Paul left something out. Now, maybe if you want to give him the benefit of the doubt, you say he forgot, but I actually think he excluded it on purpose. Do you know who the first person to see Jesus after he was raised from the dead was? It was not Peter. It was not the 12. Do you know where they were? They were hiding in a locked room because they were afraid they were going to die. Do you know who the first person to see Jesus after he raised from the dead was? You guessed it. It was Mary Magdalene. Mary Magdalene was the first eyewitness to the resurrected Christ. Isn't this amazing? This is what Mary got as a reward for her tenacious, courageous faith. Not only was she willing to be a woman disciple and probably have rumors said about her that have been going on for 2,000 years. Not only did she have to push past the fears of what other people thought about her, maybe what she thought about herself. Not only did she push past the fears of being arrested or imprisoned or killed, or even the fears of what happens when all of your hope is gone, when the one you thought was the one is dead, and yet she stayed with him. And as a result, all 4 gospel writers include the fact that Mary was the first eyewitness at the resurrected Christ. Paul left it out. Now, why did Paul leave it out? Well, you know what? In those days, this is how bad it was for women. Their testimony wasn't even considered reliable in court. It was almost never used. Women weren't trusted. So probably Paul received a tradition that was explaining that Jesus Christ had risen from the dead and named all of the men who saw him as eyewitnesses, which they did. Peter eventually saw him. The 12 saw him. They did. But left out the women because maybe he thought, it's going to weaken our story. People aren't going to believe that Jesus Christ rose from the dead if a woman was the first eyewitness. So Paul leaves it out. But a few years later, when the gospel writers wrote down Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John, because they were about to die or whatever, and they wanted to preserve the tradition of what they remembered had happened, all 4 of them realized Jesus would not want us to leave this out. And so all 4 of them record it. And you could argue that it actually, in history, weakened their case, but they knew it was true. And we know now today that she becomes this shining example of what the kinds of rewards come to those who have a courageous and persevering and tenacious faith. She got to be not only the first eyewitness to the resurrected Christ, it says she actually touched him. She got to touch his body. Like the one who she saw die, the one who she saw buried, she got to see raised to life. And then she was told, go tell the others. She was actually given the first call to be an evangelist or to go on the mission of God and proclaim the resurrection of Jesus, the message that Christians have been sharing for 2,000 years, the things that have convinced us who might otherwise not believe to believe the resurrected Christ. She saw him with her own eyes. She touched him with her own hands, and then she told everyone about it. Isn't that incredible? That this is Mary's faith, and it is both an encouragement to us and a challenge. And I believe really all I can invite us to do is what I feel to do actually as I've looked at her life this week, is to repent. Now the word repent just means to change your mind. And here's what I mean. Some of us, because of this, and we're hoping really through this series, some of us who are girls or women need to change our minds about looking down on ourselves or thinking that somehow we are less than or not as important or not valuable than men or than anyone else. And maybe some of that is because the way you were raised or how people spoke to you or what you think about yourself. But Jesus is inviting you to join the mission he is on with both men and women, with boys and girls, with young and old, changing the world, saying you are all invited to be my disciples. You are all invited to follow me. You are all able to have a courageous and tenacious faith that can change the world. So change your mind about yourself, girls and women. And what about boys and men? We also need to change our minds about women. The role and the status of women in the world is not going to change just by women championing their equality. Men must do so also. And I said to you, this is not a new idea. This is the mission God has been on from the beginning, to break the oppression that would divide us and separate us and oppress some more than other based on their gender or their skin color or their social status. We are joining the mission of God to saying, no, we are all equal before God, and we are all equally invited to passionately and courageously and tenaciously follow Jesus. And so we're hoping and praying that over these next few weeks, your mind is changed about yourself, about your role in the mission of God in the world, as you listen to these stories of faith and courage, of women whose faith changed the world, began with what I believe one of the most beautiful, trailblazing women of faith, Mary Magdalene. And my prayer and my hope for us as a whole community is over these next few weeks, we are inspired and challenged to play our part in changing the world as well.
Okay, church, just a couple of quick announcements before you go about the rest of your long weekend. Now, like I said, today is August 1st, and that means there's a new calendar of summer fun day events that are happening here at The Well. You'll be able to find that on our website at thewell.ca. And what we're doing over the course, what we've done over July and now over August is create different opportunities for you to come with your kids, all ages, to connect with one another. You can invite your friends and your neighbors. All of these things are open to the public. We just wanted to be able to facilitate different ways to actually see, like I always say, we get to see 3D versions of one another again. And so I know July has really blessed me in being able to see families that I haven't seen in so long. And so we hope you'll come to something over the course of these next few weeks. And so you can get all that information on our website. Also, if you are new here, if you started to attend the Well over the course of this last year and a half, and you'd like more information or you'd like to get connected, I'd encourage you to go to thewell.ca/new here and fill out a contact form. One of the site pastors, myself or Tony or Dave, will be happy to get in touch with you and help to answer any questions that you may have and get you connected here. Okay, that's it. August Summer Fun Days calendar is out. Go to our website and check it out. And if you're new here, man, we'd love to hear from you. With that, church, I just want to bless you with a long weekend if you're here in Ontario, and a week ahead that is just full of God's love and goodness and peace in your life.